All right, so get this. Today we're going deep into an episode of The Alex Jones Show.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're really going down the rabbit hole here.
Yeah, Alex Jones, the guy who, well, he's got some pretty out there ideas. Let's just say that.
Yeah, he's definitely known for his, shall we say, colorful opinions and his love of conspiracy theories.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting is that even though he's been kicked off most of the big social media platforms, he still has a ton of followers.
That's right. It's a real testament to the power of his rhetoric and the way he connects with a certain segment of the population.
And that's what we're going to try to unpack today.
Yeah.
Why does his message resonate with so many people? What can we learn by taking a closer look at his arguments?
And it's important to remember that we're not here to endorse or debunk his claims. We're just trying to understand them in context.
Yeah, think of this as a kind of anthropological expedition. We're going to a different world, a different way of seeing things.
Exactly. And by exploring this world, we might gain some insights into the broader political and social landscape.
Okay, so this particular episode of The Alex Jones Show kicks off with him talking about Matt Drudge.
Drudge from the Drudge Report. That's like a news aggregator, super popular with conservatives.
Right, and Drudge had just posted some tweets saying that the Republican Party should be sued for fraud.
Oh, wow. And I'm guessing Alex Jones jumped all over that.
Oh, yeah, he went on a full-blown rant about it. It was like he saw these tweets and thought, jackpot, this is exactly what I've been saying.
So he used Drudge, a figure with some credibility in conservative circles, as a springboard for his own agenda.
Pretty much, yeah, and it's interesting how he does that. He
Yeah.
tries to align himself with people who have a following, even if they just agree on one specific issue.
So what exactly is Jones's argument here? What's his main point?
Well, basically, he's saying that the Republican Party is deliberately failing to keep its promises.
Like what kind of promises?
The classic conservative talking points, repealing Obamacare, cutting taxes, that kind of stuff.
And why does he think they're not doing it? I mean, isn't it possible that it's just harder to get things done in government than it seems?
Oh, he doesn't buy that for a second. He says it's all part of a big conspiracy, a deliberate strategy by the deep state to sabotage President Trump's agenda.
Ah, yes, the deep state, always a popular Nogi man in these circles.
Right, and it's not just some vague, shadowy force. He actually names names specifically calling out George Soros.
Oh, wow, Soros, the billionaire philanthropist. Yeah, he's a frequent target of right-wing conspiracy theories.
Exactly. Jones claims that Soros is funding both Democrats and Republicans, basically pulling the strings of the entire political system.
So it's like this puppet master controlling everything from behind the scenes.
Right, and that plays into a really common theme in populist movements, the idea that there's a powerful elite that's manipulating everything for their own benefit.
And the ordinary people are the ones who suffer the consequences.
Exactly. And that's where things start to get really scary because Jones connects this political manipulation to the idea of a coming societal collapse.
Oh, wow. So we're talking full-on apocalypse now.
Yeah, he talks about the U.S. military preparing for urban warfare, and he even brings up Black Lives Matter protests.
And I'm guessing he sees these protests as part of the conspiracy?
Oh, absolutely. He claims that Soros is funding these groups to create unrest and chaos to basically destabilize the country.
So he's painting a picture of a nation on the brink of civil war orchestrated by these globalist puppet masters.
Right. It's a very apocalyptic vision. And of course, he also throws in some claims about economic sabotage.
Like what?
He says that financial institutions like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are intentionally trying to crash the stock market.
Why would they do that?
Well, he claimed is all part of this grand scheme to hurt Trump and to bring down America.
So it's like everyone's in on it, the politicians, the globalists, the financial institutions, they're all working together to destroy everything.
That's the narrative he's spinning.
Yeah.
And of course, no Alex Jones segment would be complete without his claims of censorship.
Right, he's always talking about how he's being silenced, how the powers that be are trying to shut him down.
And he uses that to further his own agenda. It's like proof that he's onto something, that he's a threat to the establishment.
It's a powerful tactic because it creates this sense of us versus them, of being the lone voice of truth in a world of lies.
Exactly. And it's also really hard to counter because any attempt to debunk or censor him just seems to confirm his suspicions.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you try to silence him, the more his followers believe he's right.
So we're dealing with a really complex situation here. And it's not just about Alex Jones. It's about the broader phenomena of conspiracy thinking and the way it's spreading in the digital age.
And that's what we're going to explore in more depth in the next part of this deep dive. We'll look at the psychology of conspiracy theories, the role of social media, and the challenges of navigating an increasingly polarized information landscape.
It's going to be a wild ride. So buckle up and stay tuned. Okay, so we've heard all this stuff about the deep state and globalist agendas and the world ending and all that, but why do people actually believe this stuff? I mean, it sounds pretty crazy when you lay it all out like that.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think to answer it, we have to understand a little bit about the psychology of conspiracy thinking.
Okay, so like what makes people susceptible to these kinds of ideas?
Well, for one thing, conspiracy theories often offer a sense of certainty in a world that can feel very uncertain. Things are changing rapidly. There's a lot of information out there. It can be overwhelming.
And it's easier to believe there's a plan, even a sinister one, than to think that everything is just random and chaotic.
Exactly. Conspiracy theories provide a framework, a narrative that helps people make sense of the world.
So instead of grappling with complex, messy realities, they get a simple explanation, a clear villain to blame.
Right, and that can be very comforting, especially when people feel like they're losing control of their lives.
So it's not just about the information itself, it's about the emotional needs that these theories fulfill.
Absolutely. And Alex Jones is a master at tapping into those needs.
How so?
Well, he uses a lot of rhetorical techniques that are designed to evoke strong emotions to create a sense of urgency and danger.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, one of his most common tactics is hyperbole. He's constantly exaggerating things, using dramatic language to make everything sound like a life or death situation.
I've noticed that he's always talking about how they're coming for us, or this is the end of freedom as we know it.
Right. That kind of language is meant to bypass rational thought and appeal directly to people's fears.
And fear is a powerful motivator.
Absolutely. When people are afraid, they're more likely to believe anything that promises to keep them safe, even if it sounds outlandish.
He also seems to love weaving together all these different historical events and conspiracy theories, like he's building this grand narrative of how everything is connected.
You're right about that. He's constantly referencing things like the Illuminati or the New World Order or, ancient secret societies. It's all part of this bigger picture he's painting.
And it makes it seem like what he's talking about isn't just some random thing. It's part of this long-standing pattern of manipulation and control.
Exactly. And that gives his claims a sense of weight and authority, even if the connections he's drawing are pretty flimsy.
It's like he's created his own alternative history where everything is part of this grand conspiracy.
And that can be very appealing to people who feel like they've been lied to or misled by the mainstream media or the government.
Right. It's like they're looking for an explanation for why things are the way they are, and Alex Jones provides that for them.
And the internet has made it so much easier for these kinds of ideas to spread.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, you had to seek out this kind of stuff, go to a special bookstore or find a fringe radio station. But now it's everywhere. It's just a click away.
And social media has created these echo chambers where people are only exposed to information that confirms their existing beliefs.
So you're saying that the internet has made it easier for people to get sucked into these conspiracy theories?
I think that's definitely a factor. And it's not just the internet, it's also the broader political and social climate. We're living in a time of increased polarization and distrust of institutions.
Yeah, it seems like everyone is suspicious of everyone else.
And that creates a fertile ground for conspiracy theories to take root. When people are already distrustful of authority, they're more likely to believe that there's some secret agenda at play.
So what you're saying is that Alex Jones isn't just some lone wolf shouting into the void. He's actually tapping into something deeper, something that's already there in society.
That's my take on it. And that's what makes this so challenging. It's not just about debunking individual claims. It's about addressing the underlying conditions that make these narratives so appealing.
So it's like we're trying to treat the symptoms, but we also need to find a cure for the disease.
That's a good analogy. And finding that cure is going to require a lot of things. Media literacy, critical thinking skills, open dialogue, empathy.
It sounds like a tall order.
It is, but I think it's essential if we want to create a more informed and less divided society.
So it feels like we've been spelunking, deep down in this like echo chamber of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, it's a weird place. It's kind of fascinating, but also kind of scary. You know what I mean?
Totally. It makes you wonder how much influence these voices actually have, even if they're not on the mainstream platforms anymore.
Right. Like, are they just preaching to the choir, or are they actually shaping public opinion in a meaningful way?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's hard to know for sure. I mean, some people would say that figures like Alex Jones are just harmless cranks.
Yeah, just entertaining the fringes.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure it's that simple.
Me neither. I mean, they obviously have a dedicated following.
Yeah.
And even if those followers are a minority, they can still have an impact.
Exactly. And they can also influence the broader political discourse, you know? Even if people aren't buying into the whole conspiracy theory thing, they might still start to question things. They might become more distrustful of institutions.
Right? It's like they're planting these seeds of doubt, and those seeds can grow in unexpected ways.
Exactly. And that's what worries me. I think figures like Alex Jones are contributing to a climate of fear and suspicion that's making it harder to have constructive conversations about important issues.
It's like we're all retreating into our own little echo chambers where we only hear what we want to hear.
And that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, how can we solve problems if we can't even agree on what the problems are?
Right. So what do we do about it? How do we break out of these echo chambers and start talking to each other again?
Well, I don't think censorship is the answer. I mean, that just plays into their narrative of being silenced by the powers that be.
So what's the alternative?
I think it starts with education. We need to teach people how to critically evaluate information, how to recognize bias, how to spot fake news.
So like media literacy skills, basically.
Exactly. We need to equip people with the tools to navigate this complex information landscape.
And it's not just about spotting fake news. It's also about understanding the broader context. You know, the motivations of the people who are spreading this information, the psychological factors that make us susceptible to it.
Right. We need to understand how these narratives work, how they tap into our fears and biases.
And I think it's also about fostering empathy, you know, being willing to listen to people who have different perspectives, even if we disagree with them.
That's so important. It's easy to demonize people who believe in conspiracy theories, to dismiss them as crazy or stupid.
But I think we need to remember that they're real people with real fears and concerns.
Right. And if we want to have any hope of bridging the divide, we need to start by understanding where they're coming from.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave our listeners with a challenge. What can you do to be a more discerning consumer of information? How can you contribute to a more informed and less divided society?
The answers aren't easy, but I think the first step is to be aware of the problem, to recognize that we're all susceptible to misinformation, and to be willing to challenge our own biases.
It's a lifelong process, but it's a process worth undertaking because the stakes are high. The future of our democracy may depend on our ability to think critically and engage in constructive dialogue.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up here. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time for another exploration of the weird and wonderful world of information.